This video shows you how to set whether a workflow system should default to being active or not active. That is essentially to confirm whether you provide a service or not to a client. It's a really important setting. If a client is set to not active, then no jobs will be created. In order for jobs to create on a trigger system, you obviously also have to provide the first trigger date. But looking at a tax year system such as P11D, if the system is set to active, the client will get a job every year without any further information being needed. Therefore, it's also beneficial to avoid having tax year systems accidentally set to active, so you don't have to end up deleting a load of jobs. So how do you influence this? Basically, click on Config and Edit Workflow Systems. Okay, drill into a particular system. So for example here I'm doing VAT returns. And on the Subsystems tab, most of the templates have a single subsystem. You might have created systems with more than one, and this setting applies individually to each of them. You want to drill into this and you want to focus on the default status at the bottom here. Okay, so you can set the system to default to being not active. That would be the appropriate setting where, for example, only a small proportion of your clients take the service. So if 9 out of 10 clients do not require you to complete their P11D, you'd obviously wish to default to not active. And then on that one case out of every 10, you would simply manually change it to active. Active is the opposite. This is where you are providing this service more often than not. You may as well default to active, and then in those cases where it's not active, you can manually change it. As I mentioned a moment ago, active is a pretty safe setting for a trigger date system. That's any system where for jobs to create, you also have to provide the first date. And not active might be a wise choice for a tax year system, because if they default to active and you forget to change those ones that don't have the service to not active, then every tax year you're going to get jobs created. Final two settings here also default to active or not active, but in this case it's based upon the type of client, not right down to the level of limited company, PLC, etc., but at the kind of bigger level of organization client or individual client. So if there is a system that only applies to organizations, so for example maybe the annual return confirmation statement system, you could have that defaulting to active for all organization clients, and of course what that means is that it defaults to not active for individual clients. Likewise, if you have a system that is only applicable to individual clients, you could have it defaulting to active for all individual clients, and it would default to not active for organization clients. So taking for example the tax returns, the 31st of January tax returns, you might default that to active for all individual clients on the assumption that nearly all of them ask you to prepare their tax return. It would then default to not active for organisation clients, which would be the correct setting for obviously all of your companies, etc. It may just mean that some organisation clients, for example partnerships and LLPs, you would have to manually set that to active, but that's of course not too difficult. So an important thing to mention, if we go to a client screen, for example this one, and if we look at let's say P11D, now this is set to not active and I can change it to active. If I put in the setting active and save it, then this client has its own setting. Okay, if I change it to not active, again it has its own setting, but until that time the client is simply using the default setting. Now this is important because if you change the default, it will change any of your existing clients. So when clients are created, that setting is not set in stone, it is simply reflecting what the default setting is. Therefore, if you were to change the default setting, you may need to go into some clients that kind of go against your new rule and give them a specific setting. A nice way to keep on top of this is actually via the services report. This shows you exactly which services are active and not active for each of your clients, with a variety of options to filter down to where a particular service is active or not active. You can set this to show all of on one screen, and you can then export that to Excel. If your role within the system is super user, manager, or partner, you can also actually use this screen to toggle these settings. That's obviously quite a quick way of doing it. I hope that explains what is potentially a slightly tricky subject, and if you have any queries on this, obviously feel free to get in touch via the help ticket system.